Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Contrast. My name is Alan.
And I'm Nisha.
On this podcast, we talk about movies and the books that they're based on.
The catch is you watch the movie and I read the book, with a few exceptions.
That is right. And today we're doing something pretty short and simple.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. You know, we had our over 2-hour jaunt across Italy with Tom Ripley last episode. So, you know, we're going to take it easy with a nice short story this week.
Yeah, we decided to make it a little bit easier on me so I can actually get through my to-be-read list that I hadn't touched in a while.
Yes, and we have some, you know, vacations and other fun, exciting things coming up. So, you know, a couple easy episodes here.
Yeah, but still fun.
Still
packed with all the same amazingness.
Yeah, and we're going to be revisiting one of our old friends from, I believe, episode 3 of the podcast.
Mm-hmm. H.P. Lovecraft.
Right, we're doing The Color Out of Space today.
For real this time.
Yeah, we were supposed to do it with that episode, and we ended up doing Call of Cthulhu instead. Something got lost in translation, but here we are with our second Lovecraft episode.
Yeah, I don't know how we both got that wrong, but that was just like we said The Color Out of Space, and the next thing you know, we were both doing Call of Cthulhu.
For sure. So yeah, again, we've touched on this in that episode, but H.P. Lovecraft, obviously a very known writer in the science fiction and kind of fantasy, you know, style of writing.
Yeah, created his own genre, basically, that people refer to as Lovecraftian, though people are starting to veer away from that term.
Right. It's been used so much for so long, I think that, I mean, it does evoke a certain thing when you use that term, but yeah, I think there's other terminology that can be used.
Yeah, he's also a piece of shit.
Of course he's a piece of shit. But yeah, so I don't know that we're going to go super into detail about who H.P. Lovecraft is and everything in this episode. You know, I would say just tune back into episode 3 for a lot of that.
Yeah.
But we'll certainly, you know, still talk about him and how he wrote this and how it kind of informed the story.
Yeah, and I think this is a good episode to remind everyone that he was afraid of everything.
Yeah.
Science, everything. Math,
everything.
Other people. He was just terrified of everything. And I think this story encapsulates that well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, this one doesn't hold the same place in terms of, you know, like being part of the Cthulhu mythos as much, you know, which is something that's branched out into so many different forms of media.
Yeah, it's huge.
But this is one I'm really glad that we're doing because this is, I mean, it seems like it's generally regarded as one of his better stories.
And one of his favorites,
yeah,
not his number one
I
favorite
believe
story.
He's quoted as saying it's his personal favorite.
Yeah. Which is interesting because as an author, I don't think I could choose.
Yeah. Maybe he knew he wasn't a great writer sometimes.
Yeah, maybe he was like, oh, this one, I actually nailed it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which we'll, you know, hear your opinions on if that's actually the case or not. But
so let's get into a little bit of the history of this story.
Yeah, please.
It was written in March 1927 and first published in, what is it called? Amazing Stories, which was a compilation of shorts, or it was a magazine published by Hugo Gernsback, who paid Lovecraft late for this, which led Lovecraft to call him Hugo the Rat, and only paid him $25.
Wow.
Which I will say is actually not too bad for a short
1927 for a short story.
Yeah, so that's about, here it is, $439 according to Wikipedia.
It could be worse.
It could be a lot worse. For the anthology I was in, I was paid $50.
Right.
And that's for every 1,000 copies sold. I don't think we've sold another 1,000 because I haven't seen a check.
No.
And I very much trust my publisher.
Yes.
But that's actually a pretty decent amount, I would say. I mean, some will pay you in the hundreds, but getting paid in the double digits is not uncommon for a short story in a magazine.
And this was towards the earlier time of him. I mean, it wasn't like one of the first stories he got published, but it was towards the earlier phase of him starting to get a lot of stuff published, especially in these anthologies and magazines and things. So.
Yeah, but he never published in Amazing Stories again because I think he didn't like Gernsback.
I don't blame him. But yeah, and this is also one that he like didn't really have to sit on for too long, you know, like
no.
He wrote Call of Cthulhu the year earlier, but it didn't get published until 2 years later.
Yeah.
So this one, you know, was a pretty short sequence between writing it and getting it published.
Yeah. One thing I really like about this Wikipedia article is that it says he didn't write another notable story or something like that until the next year. That's not that long.
No, it's really not. I mean, when you're writing like super short stuff like that, and you know, someone with so many works as he has, that is a little bit notable, but it's not a huge deal.
He had written 2 others in that time of space, in that space of time, excuse me, and they were actually like stories people know about. So it was just funny that they were like, he didn't write anything until a year later, but he also wrote these 2.
Right.
It was just,
I don't know how notable it is.
This is a really, I'm going to be honest, this is a really interesting Wikipedia article that I'm going to be referencing a lot. Okay. So this is going to be a fun one.
All right, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of, let's say a little bit more about like why he decided to write this story.
Well, one thing he was inspired by was this talking about, who said it? I can't remember the scientist, but there's a scientist who was talking about invisible light waves. Mm-hmm. And he was really fascinated by that. So he wrote about these colors out of space, which is they literally say it in the book, but the whole point is that the colors of this meteorite are not things we've seen before. Right, they are not in the human knowledge. I think that's exactly what they call them. Okay. And he was really fascinated by that, but he was also really disappointed with the very human portrayal of aliens.
Yeah. And so this is even pre like Little Gray Men, you know, so he was still dealing with like these kind of anthropomorphized aliens a lot.
Yeah. So I think he wanted to do something that truly felt alien.
Yeah.
And I would say even by today's standards, this is a pretty good job. We have a lot of really interesting aliens nowadays, like everything from The Thing to Alien, like
right. Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But even those have an anthropomorphic element, a lot of them. So.
Exactly. And this one doesn't even seem to have a physical body.
No, not really. You could argue it maybe takes over human bodies in some form, but yeah, that's about it. And in fact, that's one of the interesting things. I'm excited to hear kind of how you felt it was described in the writing, because this is definitely one of those things where just on the surface, trying to make a story about an ineffable, color that's not even like perceptible to the human mind, it's going to work probably better on a page. Yeah. At least in terms of getting that across.
Yeah. So, one thing I do think is interesting is that he didn't, obviously in the book, he doesn't describe it as being an imperceptible color. It's a color outside of human knowledge.
Right.
So it is something that can be perceived, but it's so funny to me that he was like, ooh, waves we can't see. I'm going to write about that. And then all the characters can see it. So it's like not.
Right. Yeah. Like it's one thing if I don't know. That's an interesting point scientifically, right? Because like, I don't know if you might be able to perceive it, but not understand it. But then like in every version on screen, it has to be like, I'm looking at that and saying, well, it's purple.
Well, that's what I thought was funny is I saw very little of the Nicolas Cage. I always confuse them. The Nicolas Cage movie that you watch.
Yeah.
And I was like, what a lovely shade of violet.
Right. Like it is a definable color for sure.
Like, because
it has to be.
And that's like Roy G. Biv basic. It's not like, taupe.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Which we'll get into that. I do like the way that they play with how it's visualized in different ways.
Yeah.
But the color itself is obviously violet. Yeah. It's purple.
And there's nothing, this is not a criticism. There is nothing you can, if you're going to make a movie, you're going to be dealing with that.
Well,
what else would you do? Have them just staring at something and we're like, what?
So what's happening? I want to get into more about the full scope of what we're talking about, but just since we're on the subject, does it describe anything? Like, why purple? Why is that what's shown?
I don't know.
Because that's the case in both of these adaptations that I watched. And they were made 9 years apart.
I think there's this... I think that's a cultural thing, not a Lovecraft thing. Because Lovecraft did his very classic, and it was so undescribable, and I could not describe it, and it was a color out of space, and it was something I can't describe.
Words literally cannot. My job is to put to words this thing, but I can't.
I want to say he uses words like ethereal and iridescent, or at least words that evoke similar feeling. And I think that in our culture, purple is kind of the only color that really evokes that. It's not necessarily Like there's this glowing purple has this just feel that's different from like a glowing blue or a glowing pink or a glowing red or even yellow, you know.
Well, when you say our culture, what do you even mean? Like how big of an umbrella are you covering with that? Humankind or like
well, I would say
American centric?
I would say like Western culture.
Okay.
As we would define it as in Soviets versus the rest of us.
Sure.
Which is actually totally tangent. That's what I realized recently, that's what people mean when they talk about the West.
Yeah.
It's not the Western hemisphere, which I never understood.
Correct. Yes.
But so there's just this purple is this ethereal color. It also, years ago, like hundreds of years ago, it was a color for royalty, which is, I think, interesting.
I think it still holds that place in people's minds.
Yeah. Famous Gol Gol Bordello song, Start Wearing Purple. I mean, it's just, but purple is this color that stands out. You know what I mean? It does stand
out. Yes, you're right.
Like you think about like someone wearing, let's say, a tracksuit. And if they wore a red tracksuit, you'd be like, they're wearing a red tracksuit.
Yeah.
If they wore a blue tracksuit, you'd be like, yeah, okay. If they wore a purple tracksuit, you'd be like, dang.
Right. Like Korn.
Korn?
The band.
They wear purple tracksuits?
Yeah, their lead singer, he's famous for wearing a purple tracksuit, Adidas tracksuit.
It's actually Adidas?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, it's great.
So what I'm getting here is that Korn was inspired by the color Out of Space?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the screen adaptations, there's actually quite a few.
There's a lot.
Yeah. There's, I would say 5 main ones, and I'm including the kind of lesser known one that I did watch. I think it's fun to kind of highlight one that's a little bit lesser known.
Yeah.
So I did skip a couple of the other ones that you could argue are major adaptations, but I just did not feel like were valuable enough to delve into.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I'll take some flack for that. I don't know, but so I'll just go over those. The 2 that I focused on, the main one, of course, probably the most widely seen, the newest, was made in 2019, titled The Color Out of Space, and this starred Nick Cage in the lead role. And this was notable for being directed by Richard Stanley, our friend from previous episode, who was notably removed from the 1996 adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau.
That's where I recognize the name from.
And even more notable, the man did not make a movie between 1996 and coming back to make this movie in 2019, because that's how bad that affected him.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Not to step on your toes, but I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. This was produced by Elijah Wood?
It sure was. Yeah, he has a film production company, Spectre Vision, I think it's called.
Wow.
And he jumped on board pretty early in the process to produce this.
That's really cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. So, welcome back, Richard Stanley. We missed you for the past, 4 episodes?
Yes.
5 episodes.
Or 20 years, whichever.
Yes, whichever came first. So that's kind of the main one. That's definitely the most kind of, highest production budget, and again, most well known, especially being released so recently.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one I focused on was a much lesser known one from 2010 called Die Farbe, which is The Color in German. This is also a pretty 1-to-1 adaptation from what I understand. So this was, again, super, super low budget. Kind of arguably like a student film. This was like the second film made a year outside of this dude graduating from film school. A man named Huan Vu, a Vietnamese German filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Huan is spelled Huan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of interesting to see, because there is a lot of promise in this movie.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed it and think it's definitely a hidden gem, which is why I wanted to spotlight it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kind of that was the last movie that he made, really. He's been involved in production since then, but he hasn't really had kind of the directorial or any kind of leading position.
So that movie, again, not to step on your toes, but because I'm looking at it, S.T. Joshi, who is a Lovecraft expert of some kind, said the best Lovecraft film adaptation ever made.
Yeah, I can't really argue too much with that from the ones I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I did, really enjoy the Call of Cthulhu, the 2005 version that we talked about in our previous episode, but this one's right up there in terms of kind of accomplishing that vision of, again, it's not necessarily a very commercially viable style.
Yeah, and I don't even know that the original story is commercially viable as a movie per se, but I guess we'll get into that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that they did manage to generally pull it off with the 2019 version. It's definitely an accessible film. I would not call the 2010 version an accessible film.
Okay.
And I don't even just mean in terms of like actual accessibility to view it, but just how it would play out to an audience.
Yeah.
But on that note, it was a pretty, like, almost completely lost, I think, for some amount of time, and definitely not known outside of Germany very much. But again, our, friends of the pod, the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, were kind of responsible for reviving it.
Yeah.
So they had seen it, an old version of it, and decided to distribute it, to get it printed on DVD and distribute it in the U.S.
Wow, they actually have done a lot to preserve these,
Absolutely.
Not just H.P. Lovecraft, but adaptations and stuff. And I think that's pretty cool. Film preservation is a big thing. And
it's a huge thing.
It's so big that if you have a niche, you got to do it because other places just won't necessarily be able to do it.
Yeah, the more that I learn about film preservation and like how many things have been lost over the years, the more that I just really appreciate people who do this kind of work.
Yeah, especially when silver nitrate was a thing. Mm-hmm. That we lost a lot of movies back then, I think.
Yeah, it's really too bad. Yeah, there's so many. Anytime I'm looking through these adaptations, to pick out which ones to watch or talk about for these episodes, there's inevitably, especially ones that have had a bunch of adaptations, there's always like 5 or 6, silent films or something that are lost films now.
Yeah.
They're documented, or there might be a few minutes of reel or something here and there that exist, but
they're just gone.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yeah. This was actually a film you had a hard time researching too, the German 2010 one, right?
A little bit. There's just not a lot about it. Again, It was very, very low budget. Again, the filmmaker is not super well known. It's basically only been talked about in circles of kind of H.P. Lovecraft fanatics that have rediscovered it and, kind of prop it up as being a good adaptation, because it really is.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then just, to briefly mention our honorable mentions, there's a couple other versions that I did not watch, but still want to briefly mention. So there's 1965 called Die Monster Die.
Yeah.
Terrible title.
That's a really, really bad.
Just it's awful.
Die, monster, die, exclamation point.
Which is not an uncommon type of title for this era of movies. They tried to make them all seem like this big bombastic thing. And most of the time it just like removed any familiarity of whatever source material it had and confused people.
Yeah.
It does not hold up well 60 years later to have titles like that.
No, it really doesn't.
This one actually had several titles. Another title was Monster of Terror, also terrible.
Yeah.
The House at the End of the World, though. Pretty good title.
That's a good title.
I like that title. It should have just gone with that.
That's like where the sidewalk ends.
Yeah. The Last House on the Left.
Yeah. Those are cool titles.
Those are cool titles. And it makes a lot of sense, I think, for the story to have a title like that. So,
absolutely.
Do better with stuff like that. 1960s studio executives, what are you doing? So this one is a pretty loose adaptation from what I understand. It stars Boris Karloff as kind of Nahum, is that? I don't know how to pronounce that name.
I think it's Nahum.
Nahum, who's like kind of the father figure in the story. We'll get more into that. In this one, he kind of becomes like something of a mad scientist, it seems like.
Okay.
He's trying to basically use this mysterious substance to terraform the world.
Okay.
That's what I got out of it anyway. And then it kind of goes like, Shining-y, turn on your family kind of horror.
All right.
So that's, kind of interesting. Probably worth a watch, but just didn't want to focus on it for this. And then we have 1987's The Curse. This is a version that's set in Tennessee. And it seems like kind of the notable thing about this is that at the end, which obviously we'll talk about how the story ends, the original story. In this version, there's a strong implication that the substance will then take over the entire Earth.
Interesting.
So that's a notable example there, or deviation. And then lastly, there is Color from the Dark from 2008. And this is, I believe it's an Italian production. It's definitely set in Italy.
Yeah.
And then the notable difference here being, which is kind of found in the title, the color does not come from space. It's found deep in the earth when they're drilling into the earth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take a moment to say that for the 1987, The Curse, Charles P. Mitchell said the last 20 minutes of the film are so disjointed that they virtually ruin the entire film.
Yikes. Yeah, so just to say, I don't think that any of these three were particularly well thought of, which was kind of my reasoning for not focusing on them.
Yeah.
You know, usually I'm a completionist and I like to watch all of it anyway, but...
And hey, if people think you should watch it, let us know.
Yeah, we can always do a bonus episode or something. We've certainly been talking about doing stuff more like that. So yeah, please, we'd love to hear any feedback on stuff like that you'd like to see or hear. But yeah, so that's, I'm more focused on the ones that were, I felt like, a little more relevant to the conversation itself, even though arguably a couple of these movies are more well-known historically than, like, say, the German film.
Yeah, but I think it's nice also, even if maybe there's more of a conversation to be had, which I do not think is necessarily the case in this, but sometimes it's nice to just mention these films that didn't get that love, you know, and didn't, you know, just bring them up, like talk about these lesser known films to give them a little bit of spotlight, because the other ones are so easy to find that if you Google The Color Out of Space, you'll find these other ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
The German one is fortunately on the Wikipedia
It is
page.
listed. It doesn't have a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. So like, it just talking about these things is part of preserving them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, also just bringing to light things that you may not know.
And especially when it's like an honest to goodness adaptation, you know, like a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, we'll get into those. And then there's just some, you know, I think I mentioned to you over dinner last night that it always strikes me, especially when we read these kind of older stories, how many things that I will retroactively notice kind of pulled inspiration from it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a handful of things that come to mind, and especially I think a lot of people have taken this story structure or kind of the themes of it and run, especially with like things dealing with ecology and climate change. And I don't think that Lovecraft probably had much of that in mind when he was writing this.
He wouldn't believe it was real.
No, but he would be scared of it though.
He would think it was fake and be afraid of it.
Right, exactly. But so it's kind of cool just to see the way that some of those themes have been translated over the years into stuff like that. That's, you know, much more fitting in a modern era. And especially this is, you know, something that is kind of in conversation with this story. But the most similar of like big recent movies that would, you know, tie to this theme and this story would be Annihilation.
Okay.
Which was made in 2018. It's an Alex Garland movie. You know, he did like Ex Machina and some of those, of a brilliant, you know, science fiction screenwriter. But yeah, so this is like, there's kind of this cordoned off zone in the future where things have started mutating and weird plants growing and stuff. So they kind of shut it off from the rest of the world and then send in this team of researchers to look into it. And it shares a lot of DNA with this story for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely was, you know, it was based on a 2014 novel, which I think had less elements. So it seemed like the movie kind of took the novel and added a bunch of color out of space to it.
Interesting.
Great movie.
Okay. Also, Stephen King said that his 1987 novel, The Tommyknockers, was influenced by this, if not heavily inspired. I think he just said it was influenced, not necessarily like the source material.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely not an adaptation, but certainly influenced by it. That's also been adapted, I think, into a miniseries, like pretty much all of his work has.
Yeah.
But I've never seen it. I'm not familiar with that story.
Yeah. It says it was adapted in 1993. It was broadcast. 2018, they said there was going to be a feature film, but clock's ticking on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of, you know, back and forth stuff like that with a lot of his work where people end up not making it. But
that's unfortunately common in the book world. Like a little behind the scenes peek, we were really excited to do the Mexican Gothic. I believe it was it was Hulu miniseries, and that got canceled. Well, not canceled, but they didn't renew the contract with Silvia Moreno Garcia.
Pretty bummed about that. I think it would have been really cool.
I think so too, especially as a miniseries.
Yeah, and there's like a big, especially with like the success of some of like Mike Flanagan's miniseries that are like gothic horror focused. I feel like there's a clamoring for that style.
I think they could still do it. I think, I think there's still like hope that it'll happen.
Sure. It's just disappointing it wasn't, the easy route that it seemed like it was going.
I know. It seemed like it was so like, okay, they've picked it up. It's going to happen.
And it was like right in the perfect timing of like that book becoming really big and whatever. But anyway.
Yeah, I think it could still happen. I think what needs to happen is a director needs to pick it up, not a production.
Someone passionate about it.
Yeah, not a production company. And it has to be someone like, Mike Flanagan or someone who has some experience under their belt and has proven they can do it.
See, this is the thing about Richard Stanley.
Yeah.
Is that every story you hear about the movies that he's made, he's always like, yeah, my mom would read this story to me when I was 6 years old and I grew up with it and I love it and I've read it 1,000 times and like this is a passion project. It was like that for Dr. Moreau. It was like that for Color Out of Space. So it's kind of sad that I don't actually love very many of his movies, but it's worthwhile to note that,
Yeah, I was looking at like some of the highlights from his filmography, and I don't know any of the movies.
Yeah, but anyway, not here to hate on Richard Stanley.
No, we're just saying we don't necessarily, he hasn't had the prolific career that some people have.
I certainly think that we mentioned this in that episode, but I definitely think we plan on, delving a little bit more into Mr. Stanley by doing like a conversation about that. A deeper conversation about that failed production in 96.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of fun stuff there.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. And just exploring that on its own will be really fun.
But anyway, The Color Out of Space.
Yeah. So, well, I guess let's say what the heck the story even is.
Yeah. What's the style? What's it about?
It's like a sci-fi horror, which this is kind of like the one that people were like, oh, he really found his stride.
Yeah.
In sci-fi horror with The Color Out of Space. As we said, it was like his favorite. People really hold it up as one of his best, if not best work. But it's about so it actually starts with a surveyor from Boston who goes to visit this this fictional town of Arkham.
Very popular in his stories, comes up a lot.
Yeah. And he goes to just outside the town to where they're going to be building a reservoir, I believe, or something. They're flooding the area for like a reservoir or something like that.
Yeah, they plan on damming the river.
Yeah. And he goes and discovers what they call the Blasted Heath, which is this area that they describe it as looking like acid has just been dropped there. This like huge area that looks like maybe it's been burned, but why has nothing grown? And the people of Arkham won't really talk about it, but they're like, oh, there's this one crazy dude who you should not listen to. So obviously this unnamed surveyor is like, I'm going to go listen to him. And Ami he's kind of lost his mind.
Yeah.
Is the last surviving resident. This is not to say everyone dies. This is to say most people moved out. But Ami has stayed there and tells our surveyor, who is unnamed, the story of what happened and how a meteorite came and crashed down on Nahum's land, which is a farm. And I mean, it just goes from there. I don't know if you want me to keep just.
No, I think that's a perfect setup.
Yeah.
I think this shares kind of the narrative structure that some of his other stories do, where it's kind of like, a dude from outside travels and he hears about this thing from this other guy who heard from it, this other guy, They tend to follow this kind of game of telephone a little bit.
And the guy is unnamed, which is, I think, also fairly common.
Yes, right. And I think that, I don't know if that's the purpose. I've never read, like, any of his writing about why he decided to do that in so many stories. But it does add this element of, like, oh, what if this was real to me?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think you can like put yourself kind of in the shoes sometimes when they're unnamed, and it helps when it's first person to have you can kind of get away with an unnamed character. It's very Daphne du Maurier, like Rebecca is kind of what I always go to when people talk about unnamed characters.
Right.
But I think he does do that a lot, and I think in this story it also serves to remind the reader this is not about the surveyor.
Yes.
this is about something else. You are just getting a story through him.
Right.
This is set in, so it's technically contemporaneous because they're going to fill the reservoir, but the actual meteorite crashing is 1882, which they refer to as the 80s, which I like totally was tripped up with at first. I was like, what? What the heck?
Yeah.
Because this story, it's hitting me right now. It was written almost 100 years ago.
I know, really crazy.
98 years ago.
Yeah, which, I mean, this isn't the first time we've covered a story that's 100 plus years old, but it's still just like, it's wild.
Yeah, especially when you see them saying stuff like the 80s.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, this is a completely different 80s. This is not the same 80s we are on.
I had that thought last episode too, because I think I described Patricia Highsmith as being, a notable mid-century, like, thriller author.
Yeah.
And then I thought about like, oh God, we're much closer to the next mid-century than we were that one.
yeah, that's yeah.
So that's gonna lose its meaning pretty shortly.
Yeah, we got to start just saying full dates.
Right.
No, we need this to last.
Yeah, we have enough culture that's lasted long enough that we have to be a little more specific.
Yeah. So that was actually something I was curious about because I could see adaptations for this story going like millions of ways.
Yes.
What time period do the two movies take place in?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely clear. Had I done like even a slightest bit of research or like actually tried to pay attention to that during the movie, then I could have told you. But Die Farbe, it's clearly set in I believe it's trying to say it's in the wake of World War One.
Okay.
Possibly World War II, but I don't think so.
Okay.
So this is notable because it starts in Arkham. The surveyor, his father has gone missing. So they were from Arkham, but he finds out that his father had traveled to Germany. And so the actual story and all of these happenings take place in Germany, like Southwest Germany.
Okay.
So it does still have that like Arkham anchor to it, but it ends up all happening. I mean, roughly the events are the same, right? But it's happening. And I guess that actually the story from the point of view of the narrator, the surveyor, would be a bit later on, but he's telling the story about what his father experienced years past. So I think if I had to guess, I would put the story itself, like the modern day part of the story being told, probably in like the 50s.
Okay.
40s or 50s. And then the original like happening probably in like the 20s.
Okay. So it's similar to how they set up the novel in that there's a modern day and then there's the past.
Right.
Which is how they tell the story. Okay. And
I like that part of it. Like that, I like that framing a lot. Not only is it truer to the original story, but we'll get into why I think it works best to kind of see it from an outside perspective.
Okay.
So then going to the 2019 version, this is set in modern day.
Okay.
Contemporaneous with 2019. This is, again, it takes place in Arkham, like right outside of Arkham, outside of Boston and stuff. In Boston. In rural Massachusetts. So this one is also notably different in that there is a surveyor that's involved that comes from the outside, but you're not hearing the story from his perspective. You're living with the family as they experience this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jack Nickel. Oh my God. Nicolas Cage is the surveyor, or
no? He's the father of the family. He's Nahum.
Oh,
he's Nathan in this version.
Oh, okay, but there is a surveyor.
There is a surveyor that comes from out of town, from Boston. But you're not here. It's not like a past tense, like him regaling the story.
Oh,
he's part of the story, but you are seeing it firsthand as it happens.
Oh, okay. Got you. So this meteorite crashes into this farm, and they're like, "The heck."
Is that what they sound like?
Honestly, the version I listened to, so I listened to this one, even though I have a tome of Lovecraft, I wanted to just chill on the couch and listen and play some games on my tablet. The narrator kind of gave them that voice.
So this takes place on a southern plantation.
Yeah. In Arkham.
Not rural Massachusetts.
But No, they kind of had. I didn't think he was a very good narrator.
Okay, fair enough.
So, but yeah, they were like, "What the heck?" And then they go look at it, and they get some scientists, and they decide to examine the meteorite. Yeah. They chip off a little bit, and they're like, "Ooh, this is hot! Ooh, hot potato!" And they pass it back and forth as they walk back to the lab. I'm kidding. And then they like study it, and they're like, "I don't know anything about it."
Right. They can't, like, they have some theories probably, but they don't really know what it is.
I don't think they have any theories even. They're like, it's some rock that doesn't react to anything. What's bizarre? Oh, I should have bookmarked this or something so I could have read it. But he's like, it didn't react much to anything except, and then he lists like 12 things that it reacts to. And I was like, Lovecraft. That means it reacts.
Right. Uh-huh. They do explore that a little bit in the 2010 version.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much of this science would even be available at the time that he wrote it. I'm not really positive, but
I think it must have been based on what he was saying.
Yeah. But so, I mean, I don't remember all of the I didn't write down all of the findings of the scientists, you know, but they are like, well, it behaves like it's a metal, but it's not like a metal we've ever seen before, but it's magnetic.
Yeah.
And it like stays hot, and it seems to be like disappearing as it like almost like burns off or something. It's kind of, they're not really sure.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why it's so vague, but it doesn't matter.
I mean, the big thing is that it's disappearing. Like,
right.
They put it in a glass beaker in the book, and the next morning it's just gone.
Yeah.
And I think the glass beaker is like burned through too or something like that. So it's like really weird.
Yeah, it's behaving like something they'd never seen.
Yeah. And then they go back and they're like, let's chip away at it again. And there's like a globule inside of it. Ugh. Yeah. I think that's even how they describe it on Wikipedia. But they like poke it with something and it just poof, it's
science.
Gone. Yeah. You just poke science.
Yeah.
Poke. I mean, 1920s.
That's basically what you did.
This was in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
18,
which 80s?
1880s. I almost said 1980s. 1880s. So I think poking it is pretty scientific.
Yeah, for sure.
So they poke it and it disappears. And they're already describing the rock as being like weird colors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Emanating weird colors.
Right. It's even the night of, which I don't know if they describe like kind of the crashing itself in the story.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of eyewitness account of that or anything?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's Nahum telling the story to Ami, telling the story to our surveyor.
It's like, it goes through several cycles.
So I think he like, I don't know that he actually sees it coming down. I think he just finds it outside and is like, he realizes something has happened.
In both versions, it's like a big loud crash, you know, right? So they don't see it happen per se, but they see that it's and that it's like emitting this light and burning, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And they do some more tests with it, and this time they keep it in lead.
Okay.
And it actually stays a little bit, which is cool. But
it does seem like there's more science experimentation going on in this story than in some of these other versions.
Really? They don't do much science?
Oh, there's none in the 2019 version.
Oh, what the heck?
It's one of the weakest parts of it.
Oh, because that's like, you know, the whole interesting thing is that, like, especially if you're doing it from a modern perspective, to be like, nothing does, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, that's so much more interesting.
No, okay, so literally what happens is Nicolas Cage, like, he finds this meteorite in their front yard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he calls the police, and the police show up, and they're like, that's weird. And then the mayor of Arkham comes with them, and it's like, why are you wasting my damn time again? Like, there's no backstory to this whatsoever. The mayor's just an asshole for some reason.
Okay.
And, I mean, later on, it's sort of like, I think they wanted to make her character that way, because later on, she's, like, fighting for the reservoir to still be made.
Okay.
So it does kind of make sense in that way, but they basically just come and she's like, I don't know, this is stupid, and then leaves. And they just leave it. Like, no one does anything with it. The only person who does remotely anything is the hydrologist, who is serving as the surveyor in this case.
Yeah. It was like, maybe we should talk about this.
But literally, it's just like Nick Cage and his family out there like, this is a weird rock.
Oh my gosh. That's... Wow. Yeah. So I would say that's equally scientific, but the standards have drastically changed.
At least they were trying in, these other versions.
Yeah. Yeah, like they actually went and got scientists.
Right.
I admit that the scientists were doing a lot of poking it with a stick, but, they tried.
At least they were wearing a lab coat while they poked it.
Yeah, that's like the number one thing to be a scientist.
Not just jeans and a flannel shirt.
No, you put on a lab coat and then you can do whatever you want, and it's science.
That's right.
Yeah. So they kind of stopped talking about the meteorite at this point.
It starts to become not important.
Well,
really.
It disappears, actually.
Right.
That's right. It gets struck by a bunch of lightning and then it's just gone.
Right. Yeah, there's a big storm either the night after it crashes or maybe a couple nights later.
I think it's 2 nights later.
Okay. It's a little unclear in the adaptations.
Yeah. So it crashes. They have their first day of poking at it. They come back the next day to poke at it. And then it disappears. Yeah. So I think once they expose the globule, that's really hard to say, expose the globule, and they burst it or something, that makes it disappear.
Yeah.
And that made it attract like lightning and stuff like that. Or cause the lightning. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Something to do with what kind of substance it is clearly attracted the lightning. I don't know if that like supercharged something or I don't know. But
yeah.
Yes, essentially there's something in the center of this meteorite that is then released.
Yeah.
So it seems like it was by design that this was how this worked, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And so it's gone. And then that's when in the book, lots of time, or in the story, lots of time passes. There's like seasons and years.
Oh.
And you just watch the farm kind of slowly decay because at first things grow in abundance.
Yeah.
And the fruit are huge and beautiful, but they taste like nothing.
Yeah.
And then things start to die and go gray and like ash, kind of things that happens to the animals where they become like deformed and then turn to ash and crumble. And their meat is also inedible, even though they're not like drinking the water from the well or anything, or they're not, they're not eating the grass that was tainted.
Oh, okay. But it's every living thing in this area.
Yeah.
Starts to become affected.
Yes. Including Nahum's wife.
And are they the gardeners
in
this? Okay.
Yeah. Nahum's wife, who he locks in an attic.
Yes.
Yeah. Because, that's what you do with your wife who's going insane.
Of course.
You lock her in an attic.
There is an interesting element of that in the 2019 version I'll talk about.
Okay. So he locks her in the attic, and this is where Ami's like, I kind of went back and forth checking on them. And then you watch the family basically go crazy. Like, he has 3 sons, all with really interesting names. One of them dies. One of them disappears. One of them falls down a well. Oh, no, one of them goes to the attic and dies.
Yes.
One of them falls down a well. One of them, at the end, dies. In the well.
Okay.
It's so confusing. Anyway.
It doesn't matter.
And then Nahum himself, in front of Ami, is clearly losing his mind and is consumed by this thing.
Yes.
And turns to ash and crumbles and has some last feeble words that were read like this.
Okay. You're going really fast here. Okay, so what are some of the other things that start to happen, like, from the perspective? So again, like, one of the big differences between the book and the story in the 2010 version is that we're seeing it again from this kind of outside perspective after the fact, right?
Yeah.
2019, you're seeing all this happen live.
Yeah.
Right, so you're seeing, like, everything. So it doesn't necessarily probably tell you everything in the story?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
No.
About what's happening to the family?
No, because you're seeing it through Ami's perspective.
Right.
So you're only seeing him kind of come back and forth. And there's like a point where he's just not there for 6 weeks.
Right.
He doesn't check on them for a really long time.
Yeah, in the 2010 version, it's basically the same. So you have, again, this outside surveyor from Arkham has come looking for his father. There's a guy named Armin Pierce, which is clearly the Ami Pierce character in this version. So he's like kind of the local guy. He tried to help out the gardeners a little bit after this happened because he noticed things were becoming very hard for them. They just seemed like sick all the time. And like, again, they couldn't really grow anything worthwhile.
Yeah.
So he's, again, recounting this story many years in the future. But yeah, so same thing. You're kind of seeing everything through his eyes. The difference, of course, being that in the movie, it flashes back in time, right? So you
Yeah.
are seeing it from his perspective as it's happening.
Yeah.
But again, you're not seeing the whole thing because he's not living with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, same thing. He like agrees to help them with whatever they need. And so kind of, Nahum is like, oh, well, if you could just, meet me to deliver some stuff every so often, whatever. And then he stops showing up. So he goes to check on him.
Yeah. Yeah. Do they talk about the well water going bad at all? Because it does go bad in the story, actually. And Ami's like, you shouldn't be drinking this.
Yeah, I don't think they really harp on it too much in the 2010 version.
Okay.
It's a big deal in the 2019 version.
Yeah, the well is actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about the well a lot itself, but they don't necessarily talk about it being tainted. They more refer to it as it's clearly the source of something.
Yeah,
that's corrupting.
This one they start by being like, your well water is bad, you should dig a new well. And Nahum's like, nah.
Yeah, there's in every version there's a lot of like them ignoring signs of clearly something is wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the kind of thing that like it's so progressive that unless it happened like overnight, you have to ignore something.
Which again, like the parallels with climate change, man, it's crazy. It's so not on purpose, but
yeah,
it's definitely there.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, through all of history, there have been changes that people have warned about, and I'm sure Lovecraft saw his own changes happening in the world, and we know he was terrified of change. But I'm sure there is.
Yeah, black people started having rights during his time. He was not happy.
No,
about that.
He was not, and he was very like anti-Semitic. Like he was total xenophobe. Like if you did not look exactly like him, he did not like you. But I think
he would have loved the 40s though.
Yeah. But I think that sci-fi, a lot of people say, is inherently allegorical.
Yes.
So I think that, like, yeah, there are a lot of parallels to climate change. I don't think that's an accident. I think that there were parallels back then he was probably seeing with change and people ignoring it and, whether or not the change was good or bad or what, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's the thing. It's not like he was like, oh, climate change is real and I'm going to write about it, because there is a lot of stuff nowadays like that, right? But yeah, you're right. It's so based on ingrained human experience that, these are big human nature archetypes, right? Like,
yeah,
you don't need it to be about a specific thing, but it's just, that is probably, I mean, I'm certainly biased in my viewpoint on that subject, but it's definitely one of the bigger examples of that in our current day where, things change just a little bit at a time. You don't notice until it's too late.
Yeah. And I mean, this story, it's literally, I think like, it must be over a year because they talk about like the first season and then the second season. And like, so it's really happening slowly, but like, you do think like at a certain point you'd be like, my wife is going crazy. I got to take her somewhere else. Yeah. Nothing's growing here. But there's also like some people just get really stubborn and set in their ways.
Yeah,
and I think you see that a lot in rural living where people just don't want to give up what they have. So
is it implied pretty well that the Gardner family was like well established in that area already?
Yeah, okay. I think so. I mean, I wouldn't say they didn't really talk about like the history of the like this is the history you're getting.
Yeah.
But like everyone knows the Gardners.
There's no implication otherwise.
No, they didn't just come and settle. I think it seems like this has been their land for a while, and like I said, everyone knows the Gardners, everyone knows Ami. It's like the community all know each other and they're all like talking about it.
That's a somewhat subtle but I think kind of strong deviation in the 2019 version is that they all were from the city. They don't say, but I'm assuming that means Boston. And it was like Nick Cage's Nathan's father's farm that he had moved away from, and so they come back with all their the whole family,
Yeah.
And so it doesn't say exactly how long they've been there, but they're clearly like resettling. They don't know how to farm very well. So there's an element of that stubbornness coming from that of just like, well, I have to power through this and learn.
Yeah.
So I do think it adds something kind of interesting.
I think because we're detached from Nahum's perspective, we don't really see why he was staying. I mean, you can understand that his mind is being affected to a certain degree. So that's certainly part of it. But apart from that, you don't really know why he just like it. He never says like, this is my land and we've been here for hundreds of years. Like he never says anything like that. So
it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, exactly.
I just think that was an interesting change for the perspective change.
Yeah, for sure.
An interesting element it added.
Yeah.
No, I think it's very much implied the opposite in the other versions.
Yeah.
They've been there for a long time.
Okay. Yeah. So it's more similar to at least what it seems like in the, it was referred to as a novelette on Wikipedia, but I think it's too short. I think it's not a novelette.
Interesting.
But
Yeah, usually that's at least 100 plus pages, right?
Something like that. But, I did not Google it.
Whatever. It's a short story. Yeah, I mean, so again, the 2010, the German version is very much hitting all of these beats you're talking about. I really think it's a very accurate adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like kind of its strength is in its style.
Okay.
So again, it's in black and white.
Yeah.
Which I think serves it pretty strongly. Again, similar to how we talked about the Ripley adaptation only showing color in one particular instance. Of course, this version also chooses to only show the color in color.
Yeah.
So it's like a cool way to distinguish it, where it's like you could argue, oh, it's not just like a purple thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it is notably different from anything else in the world.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, so it works pretty effectively that way. And then also just the whole thing has kind of like an otherworldly feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this like kind of undescribable sense of dread that it manages to get into the movie.
Okay.
Which I really, really liked. Like it actually became quite scary at times. And again, that's pretty notable considering how low budget it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about I think it tried to kind of punch out of its weight class with effects, and it doesn't necessarily work. But for the most part, it's pretty good. And I will say that the discovery that like after those like 6 weeks or whatever, when he comes back to check on the family, the discovery of them at that point is scary as fuck.
Yeah.
There's a really like kind of interesting shot of, I believe it's the wife that he finds, and he kind of like turns her body, like he thinks she's dead.
Yeah.
She like turns her body that's kind of like rotting and decomposing already, but she's still alive, and like looks at him, and he sees the color in her eyes and in her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like kind of consumes the room. It's really quite cool.
Yeah. So in the when Ami goes back in the book, he does go up to the attic and he goes to check on the wife, and she's like indescribable. It's another one of those like she's completely transformed. The color is everywhere, and then it like can't. I think he like beats her to death.
Oh my god!
To like spare her, and then like runs out of the room. Okay. And then that's when he goes down and sees Nahum is like starting to crumble.
Yeah. Does it describe anything else in terms of how they've changed, or is it just like that they're kind of ashy?
No, it's kind of just ashy and crumbling.
Okay. No, that's cool. I mean, because it is, fairly well talked about that the color, again, like the meteorite was constantly burning. Mm-hmm. The color itself almost seems to do the same thing to whatever it touches.
Yeah.
But slowly.
Yeah. I saw some pretty cool points that some of the ways he describes things, becoming gray and brittle, the way that they sort of decay is very similar to what happens when you're overexposed to radioactivity. Mm-hmm. And that could be another thing that influenced the story.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think also when we talk about these colors, radioactivity is one of the things that often gets mentioned because it's putting off these waves that are very, very dangerous.
Yeah, and unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is I don't think he ever openly Lovecraft never openly admitted it, but I think he did. There is speculation that he was inspired by radioactivity.
Yeah, no, I would certainly believe it. It makes so the 2010 version is pretty similar in terms of like how kind of the body horror element of it, where they do just kind of like decompose. They look a bit like zombies, but not really. Like, I don't know, but it's clearly their body is like kind of burning from the inside out.
Okay.
And it does seem to just be like, it's like bioaccumulation, basically, right? Like they're existing in this space and eating things and drinking the water and everything. And this color, this substance is kind of like pervaded everything, right? Mm-hmm. So anything that they do in the area, they're just slowly consuming more and more of it, and it's destroying them.
It's kind of like if you lived on a block of uranium.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really valid comparison.
Yeah.
So yeah, the 2019 version definitely takes some liberties as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Which some are good, some are bad, I would say. It definitely has that same... It's not treating it so much as burning from the inside out. There's like an element of possession to it. There's, where it starts causing them to act violently towards each other.
Okay.
Where, in the other version, it's more that they just become like apathetic, right?
So in the book, they do start like screaming and like being weird.
No, it's more than that. Yeah, in this version, it's like Nick Cage is about to kill his whole family.
Yeah, so this is like, they're not a danger to... That's even one of the things, is that like Nahum lets his wife, even when he knows she's losing her mind and like screaming and stuff, he doesn't break her up until one of his sons just gets too scared of her.
Mm-hmm.
But she's never a threat.
Okay.
None of them are ever a threat to anyone else.
Right. Which, again, makes sense. And again, like the German version, that's what happens. It's more of this very sad, like, he comes upon this horrific thing that's happened.
Yeah.
Which I find to be very effective.
Yeah. Okay.
To see his perspective of, this. But again, it's not as interesting for that to happen because you don't even really know what's happened. So how do you adapt that if you're seeing it happen in front of your eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, it's like it starts out in that version where they all kind of become more lethargic or more out of it. They have more of these kind of, space out sessions, where they just sort of disassociate.
This is the 2010 version.
2019.
2019. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a scene where the mom, Teresa, she's cooking dinner and like is like chopping carrots and just slices her fingers right off and doesn't even like respond.
Wow.
And so they end up leaving and all this other stuff happens to the kids while they're gone. But yeah, it's like they're all slowly losing their minds in that way. But it does turn into like, there's a point where I think that kind of hesitance that's shown by the father figure in the other versions plays out by Nick Cage going like certifiably insane.
Okay.
And then there's it bumps everything up to an extreme, right? So there's another case where they go they keep alpacas.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Which I think that Mr. Gardner refers to as the animal of the future. That's like his his goal is to be an alpaca farmer.
Okay.
But not for the fur or anything. Like, he wants them for meat and milk. There's a scene of Nick Cage milking an alpaca in this movie.
Okay, hold on. We need to pause everything and talk about alpacas being the animal of the future. Okay, milking alpacas, whatever. Meat, these are scrawny animals. They're not...
His were okay,
But they
got big haunches.
But you look at like a cow. Like, that's made for meat.
Yeah, of course.
Look at a horse.
Look, they do not elaborate on this at all. His children make fun of him for saying this.
And he's not even going for their fur as well.
No.
Because it would be maybe the animal of the future if you argued that we're going down this road. If you argued that you got the fur, you get milk, and then you get meat when they die.
Yeah.
Maybe
he's going to use the fur. I don't know. But the point is that his children keep saying the only thing people care about alpacas for is their fur, and you're not even using them for that.
Yeah, so that sounds like he's not at all using the fur.
But again, this is like he just started doing this. So I don't know. There is no detail given about any of this.
Okay. Well, I could be on alpacas or the future train, but that's like, cows. They have leather. They can pull heavy things. This is in India, like the big thing. Why you don't kill cows is because you can use them. You can eat them and then you have milk.
Yes.
That's 4 things right there.
This is basic sense. And again, this is used as comic relief in the movie.
Okay. That's fine.
Because it doesn't make sense.
You need comic relief in movies.
You do. I mean, again, it was kind of a throwaway thing, so I don't know, but
there's nothing wrong with this. I just had to talk about it.
But it's like, okay, so all these strange things keep happening. And this is what really riles him up, is that, like, he will come home and find the alpacas have escaped again because they keep trying to get the fuck off the land.
Yeah.
You know, but he thinks it's the kids not taking care of them or not putting them up when he's supposed to. So this is what, like, sort of riles him up against his family, right?
Okay.
Different things like that. There's 5 or 6 examples of things like that. Don't need to go into all of them.
Okay.
Anyway, so the alpacas turn into demon horses at one point.
Oh, that's like, okay.
Essentially.
That's cool.
Pretty horrifying. Like, all their flesh has been kind of ripped away. They're just, like, kind of these discombobulated, like, muscular things. I don't know. Pretty terrifying.
Alpacas are so freaking cute.
They're very cute.
So that I see why they used alpacas.
Yeah. It's more noteworthy after the fact, I'd say. So anyway, they go in to check on them. Eventually, he shoots all of the alpacas.
Okay.
But at one point, they go to check on him, and so like their youngest son has been kind of obsessed with the well, right? He's the one that's like, you know, it's kind of like poltergeisty. Like, he's always staring at the TV that's malfunctioning, and he's, you know, he hears these voices and things like that. You know?
Like The Shining too.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So, he's kind of the one that's like most drawn to it. Mm-hmm. And that has various effects over the course of the story. But, so at one point he's going out to like look at the alpacas, and the color basically comes and shoots out of the barn. And like his mom comes up and grabs him right at the last minute.
Oh, okay. And
they both kind of get zapped by it.
Yeah.
And it turns them into like an eldritch horror, basically.
Oh.
So it like fuses their bodies together. And then that is why they get locked in the attic.
That is so off the wall. I'm
telling you, this movie goes batshit crazy.
Yeah, that is not.
And I don't even mean in like a bad way per se. Certainly not all of it works for me.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is like a terrible movie or anything. It's definitely like B-movie territory.
Okay.
But like, I think on purpose.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
I had heard a lot of pretty negative opinions about this movie.
Yeah.
And I was pleasantly surprised. I'll just put it that way.
Oh, okay.
Certainly not some sort of certifiable classic or anything, but it's not as bad as some people say.
Is Nicolas Cage going through like a horror period right now?
I mean, he loves horror movies.
He does?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Has he been doing them for a while?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I kind of only knew about Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh, no, he's in all kinds of stuff. No, this one's been most often compared, I think, to Mandy.
Okay.
Came out the year before, I think. It's another horror movie that he was the lead in. I think he had some great part in getting made.
Okay.
No, the dude loves horror movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like Nicolas Cage.
Me too.
I think he's...
Imagine wanting to be a movie star and being attached to the Coppola name and being like, I don't want that name.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah. He renamed himself to not be tied to the Coppola family.
Yes, that's right. So there is a little Nepo baby there, but
of
he
course,
also
like,
wanted
not to say that he hasn't used that, you know, to get him some parts or something, but like...
But he could do it on his own, too.
He's not doing anything else like any other member of that family is.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that. Wow. Yeah, I like him. He's cool.
I will say that he's not great in this movie.
Oh, really?
I mean, the whole thing is pretty campy. He's definitely going very campy. It works in parts, but sometimes it's just like a little intense.
Okay.
I don't know. He gets better as the movie goes. It like makes more and more sense, but he's so like strange and off-putting at the beginning when he's supposed to just be a dad.
Oh.
You know, that it's kind of weird.
Okay.
But the whole family kind of acts that way, you know?
Yeah.
They don't really act like people.
Oh, okay. And that doesn't really work for you at the beginning?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't like the setup a lot.
Yeah. Because Nahum's like a pretty normal guy. He's like, what's this on my ranch?
That's what matters the most. Like, you stop rooting for him in this movie, which I don't like.
Oh. Yeah, I don't think you ever stop. I mean, Nahum's always like, he's stubborn and everything, but you never like stop rooting for him. But also you don't really have the chance to. It's like, there's just not much time.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fine, but you're not getting painted a picture of someone you don't like. You know?
Yeah.
It feels like a tragedy, like he's come upon a tragedy.
Yeah.
Right. And the only thing I will say is that it does, I think, knowingly change the perspective a little bit, where you're less so following him and more so following his daughter.
Okay. Oh
So
yeah, and we should say
the kind of middle child, which I believe is Thaddeus in the other version.
Oh gosh, I don't remember. Yeah, I think Thaddeus is one of the sons, so we'll say yes.
In the 2010 film, he is the second oldest.
Okay.
And he's the one that you get the most time with. He's the one that's always in town. People are always asking him about his family. He gets the most screen time.
Okay.
You know. And so I think that the daughter in this case has kind of taken that spot.
Yeah. So I just want to mention real quick, actually, two things. One, in the Nicolas Cage version, there are 3 children, one's a daughter. Mm-hmm. In the book, it's 3 sons.
Yeah.
Just want to point out that difference.
Yeah. And again, the 2010 version is like the same.
It's 3 sons.
You have, let me see, you have Samuel as the oldest. You have Thaddeus as the middle, and then Marwyn is the youngest.
This one is Zenas, Thaddeus, and oh my gosh, what's the last one's name? They have like really interesting names, but they're literally like you don't know Nahum has a son, and then they're like, and then Thaddeus got stuck in a well.
I think that it's pretty well implied that everyone had children back then.
I mean, yeah, but they don't say anything about it until the tragedy strikes the son. And then that's literally how they introduce them. They're like, here's his youngest son. And you're like, wait, his youngest son. And then they're like, and this is his other son. And then he does this thing. And then this is the last son who's there and is in the well. Actually, you never even like meet the last son. Ami's like, where is Zenas? And Nahum is like, he's in the well has taken him, the well. And they do find 2 sets of bodies down there. They're bones of the bodies down there. But they literally like, they only mention the sons by name when they're about to like be like, and this is how he died.
Right. And this is not that different in the German version.
Okay.
Like, it's, again, they're not important.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is what happened, right?
Yeah.
So this is what happened to this person. This is what happened to this person.
Yeah.
One funny thing is that the oldest son is called Benny in the 2019 version. He's Sam in the German version, but in the 2019 version, they have a dog named Sam.
Oh, okay.
So I'm assuming that was paying some sort of homage. I don't know.
Some kind of reference, yeah.
Something. I think that probably that's been a name in some of the other versions, too.
Yeah. Is it too early to ask if the dog survives?
The dog does not live.
Oh.
They all die.
Oh.
Every last one of them. The only person who gets away is the hydrologist, the surveyor.
Okay. Well, that's...
Who, again, is actively involved. Oh, so you're kind of splitting, I would say the lead perspective is split between the daughter and the surveyor.
Okay.
But again, he's, like, in there with them, right? Like, he's almost fulfilling that, like, Armin, or what's his Ami role, in a way, because that person's not really found in the 2019 version.
Yeah,
so he's kind of covering all of those bases.
Okay,
right? Because you're kind of, I guess it does sort of say that he's like the narrator, but only at the end. Like the final scene is him looking at the now full reservoir, like years later.
Yeah.
And, saying like, basically only I remember that this happened.
Yeah.
Whatever. So it does touch on that a little bit. But
yeah. Ami has that at the end where he's like the last, they like go and investigate the house and the bodies and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then they like book it out of there because they're terrified. He's like with authorities.
Yeah.
And they look, and as they're running, Ami looks back, and then when the story takes place, he's the last person living. Like all the professors are dead and everything.
Right, yeah.
And then the hydrologist or the surveyor is like, I would not drink that water.
Right. Well, he had started in this version, what's his name? His name is Ward.
The hydrologist.
The hydrologist.
Okay.
And so he starts testing the water, and he's like, you shouldn't drink this. There's something contaminating it, and I don't even know what it is. Mm-hmm. It's so strange, but please do not drink it.
Yeah.
And of course, they ignore him.
Yeah.
But that's at the very end, he has the line that, I hope the dam water that covers this place will be very deep, but I still will not drink it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I love in the book. He's like, I did my job. I got out of there. I won't drink the water. And he's like, you're not going to tell all these people about how like the land was just completely destroyed and poisoned.
Right.
Like, you're just going to be like, I'm out. I did my job. I'll be fine.
Well, so that's kind of the thing in that movie is that, again, he reports this contamination that he's found.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the mayor is like, but I've already signed all these environmental reports and this and that, and it's already all approved, so now you're going to get my reservoir shut down, this whole thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very small aspect of the movie, but that is a scene that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
So he clearly was, like, fighting against it this whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that is like, it's the same in the novel. It's like very short little thing at the end where he's like, bye.
But there's a couple like interesting elements that are shared between these two, especially how they describe stuff like once everyone starts going mad.
Uh-huh.
So I'm curious if this one is in there because of it being in the 2010 version. There's a point where
I think he's Armin in your version, Ami in my version.
He comes to visit, and I can't remember if this happens at the same time that he discovers them all like crumbling, or if it's before that.
Okay.
But I guess it must be that time, and then he goes and looks for them. Mm-hmm. Because he finds Nahum in his living room just sitting there staring, and he's like, where's the rest of your family? And he says, they're all right here. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's in the novel.
That is in the novel.
Yeah, that's so that's the last time he goes back.
Okay.
Then
that's when he finds the bodies and everything.
Yeah, so what happens is he's like, where are they? They're like, he's here with me. And then Ami's like, what's this sound upstairs?
Yeah.
And he goes upstairs, he discovers the wife, and
right.
then he comes down, and that's when Nahum is crumbling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a shared thing in every version.
That's cool.
So in the 2019 version, it's Ward that shows up with the sheriff instead.
Mm-hmm.
And, same thing. He's like, oh, well, where's your family? Oh, they're all right here, except for Benny. Benny's in the well, Same thing. But it's one of the cooler parts, I think.
Yeah, so that's
kind of haunting.
Yeah, it is really haunting. So Nahum has the like, oh, they're all here. And Ami's like, he's clearly lost his mind. Goes to see the wife, comes back down, and Nahum has a moment of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And is talking about the color and the well and how the well has the kids, and then he just like crumbles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is slightly different, the 2019. So he there's that scene where he's imagining they're all sitting there, and then he does snap to for a second, but only enough to go upstairs and shoot the wife-son monster that is in the attic, because it's now trying to attack their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So he does have that moment of clarity, so he protects the daughter. But then they're going to leave the house, they're taking him and the daughter and everyone with the sheriff to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And Nathan is about to shoot Ward.
Okay.
The surveyor.
Yeah.
But then the sheriff shoots him instead.
Okay.
But then he's still walking around.
Oh.
And so he goes back in and sits on the couch again. And then Ward goes back in, and kind of the color starts to swirl all over the place.
Ooh.
And you can see he blinks and sees all the family sitting there in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything kind of, it turns the screen to light basically. And then that's when it goes to the future.
Okay. Okay.
It's a pretty cool ending. Again, I like some of the visuals there. It's clearly, I'm not going to say that the effects are something to write home about in that version, but it's certainly better than the 2010 version, because it had a much bigger budget.
Yeah.
So it's able to do a little bit more. But I like certain things, especially at the beginning when this is first happening, they start to notice these little strange things, right? And one of them is that they'll see this little wisp in the air that looks like this kind of purple lined streak of something, So there's this subtlety to it at the beginning, which I quite like.
Oh, okay, that is pretty cool. Did they use much? So obviously for the light, has to be mostly CGI. But did they use much practical effects? Do you know, or do you know what that kind of balance was like? For I almost called them llamas, alpacas.
No, that was all CG.
Okay, and I guess a lot of that would have to be CGI now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it seemed like maybe some of the squelching monster-ish kind of substance at the bottom of the well was maybe some practical effects.
Okay.
Mixed with CG. But
Okay.
yeah, I would say that's about it.
When was this? When,
Oh, maybe I think some of the monster, like the mom son monster, kind of looks like it was probably some makeup and stuff.
Okay.
Some of it's CG still, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a combination. I guess I'm trying to think that 2019 wasn't quite the like renaissance of practical effects, because I think we're kind of going through that right now.
We are getting back to it for sure. Like especially like this year, The Substance. Well, I guess last year now, but really took that body horror back to like the Cronenbergian 80s 90s practical effects.
Yeah. Practical effects are just they're really amazing. And I think
I will always love them more. Like
yeah, I mean CGI has its place. For sure. And I would say, like, when you're talking about this color out of space, like, yeah, you need these wispy things going through the air. How are you going to create that? It has to be CGI. So there is its place. But I think that finding that balance with doing as much as you can with practical not only saves on your budget, but it can make the, like, fidelity of your film better and just lasts longer. And, like, people want to watch it more. Like, you look at old movies now that used a lot of CGI and they didn't age well.
No.
But you look at old movies with practical effects and like maybe the blood looks a little corny or whatever, but like most of them aged better.
Yeah.
Except for like
you know what it is, Yeah.
Like
I don't know.
Yeah.
I try not to be too hypercritical of CG because that's my natural inclination to kind of be a hater.
Yeah.
But like I've been singing the praises of the Robbie Williams monkey movie. That's a lot of gratuitous CGI.
Yeah.
But it does use it pretty well.
I think also there's a time and place. Like when you're going to make this monkey movie about Robbie Williams, like, yeah, it's going to be CGI. Have fun with it.
Well, of course.
Own it. You know what I mean?
Nobody wants to see some Howard the Duck shit walking around looking like a real ass duck.
What I'm thinking about right now is Horror Express with their like gorilla monster.
Yeah.
Like that's a use of I mean, they didn't have like CGI. Like, what were you gonna do? Draw it on the frames, like? But
their budget was $1 gorillion.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Yeah. Okay.
That might be time to wrap up.
I think that's about where. Okay, Alan, do you have anything else you'd like to share about? I think I've touched on most of the. Oh well, I guess I want to say that like one thing that's interesting is the trees are moving without wind.
Oh yeah,
and there's like color coming from the trees, and it seems to be predominantly at night that this color comes out. And that's why Ami and the 6 men he's with run away. But how it actually is affecting the world, and like it's one of these forces that you're not sure if it's actually malevolent or what its purpose is.
Right.
It just
like
it's clearly feeding, and they say at the end it tries to ascend, and it falls back into the well. So maybe it's even trying to leave and get home, but it's not. It's just not one of these things that you can say is a bad entity.
Right, because it's just, well, I forget which version, but they say that it's trying to turn our world into theirs.
Okay, that's interesting.
And like I said, because there is that element initially of it, like making things very beautiful, all the big fruits and the plants are thriving and there's all these new looking plants and things,
Yeah.
But then it obviously all turns away and, all of that is... Again, none of the fruit is edible or anything. So, yeah, I don't know. There's some sort of hidden meaning in there somewhere, I think. But
yeah.
Oh, the only other thing I forgot to mention is there's an added character in the 2019 version as well, played by Tommy Chong.
Who does he play?
So he is a guy named Ezra, and it's basically like Ward is asking... Nathan, when they first talk, like, okay, so does anyone else live on the property? And he's like, oh, well, there's our squatter. So it's like, yeah, his name's Ezra, he lives over there. He keeps to himself. So they just let this like hippie dude live on their land in a little shack.
Does he survive?
No.
Oh.
No, again, no one lives except for Ward.
Yeah, I thought maybe it'd be funny if he survived.
No. So he, there's some cool parts with him. It's pretty goofy overall. So he basically just like the older son, Benny, goes to smoke pot with him sometimes.
Okay.
And he's like, he has like this solar electric grid on his little shack that he
Nice.
uses to, he has all these cameras out in front and stuff. So he captures some like audio recordings and video of some of the stuff that happens.
Okay.
And so like later on, once Ward comes back to investigate, when he really realizes something is wrong, he goes to visit his shack and he finds him again, like fully absorbed by the color, just sitting in his chair, like rotting away.
Mhm.
But he's playing on loop this audio track that he made, talking about like, our world is now theirs, and there's people living under the floor, and this and that, and like these sounds that I heard, and whatever. So it's kind of creepy.
Okay, that's really interesting.
But generally, he's just a goofball.
Yeah,
Tommy Chong. I mean,
Tommy Chong. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So that was just another interesting note that does not fit in any part of the adaptation, but.
That is absolutely not something I expected. So it sounds like the 2019 version does a pretty good balance of comic relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does things that I don't necessarily love, especially as an adaptation, but like given the change in perspective and to make it a more audience friendly movie, I think you need to have.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I won't complain too much about it.
Yeah, but you preferred the German version, you would say?
Yeah, definitely. It's a better adaptation. I just think more creative, especially again on like clearly like a shoestring budget,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm always more impressed by that, and there's clearly a lot of love put into it. I mean, there's parts of it that you could argue like don't work, but then they kind of accidentally work for me. So like a lot of the acting is like really wooden and not very good.
Okay.
I mean, I was looking at the list. There's a couple people who like have been in quite a few German productions, that are in this act, especially Armin. I think he was kind of like the star that they got for it.
Yeah.
Because he does have quite a few acting credits in Germany. But the rest of them, a lot of them, that's their only film credit.
Wow.
So I mean,
So
you're
really
dealing
is.
with pretty inexperienced people here.
Yeah.
But again, it fits into the style where it doesn't feel like this is happening on Earth sometimes.
Yeah.
So like it does and it doesn't, like it does feel like the German forest land, way out there, but there's something like otherworldly about it.
Yeah.
And so it kind of adds to that in a weird way. Not always, but a lot of times.
And I love talking about how sometimes these shortcomings actually work in favor.
Yeah.
My favorite example being Indigo Prophecy, the game.
Right.
But I think that sometimes we do have to look at something and think like maybe the acting wasn't great, but maybe it served it.
Yeah. I mean, intentionality is important, but it's not the whole picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge thing, especially with what we're doing at that analyzing, is what did they accidentally do?
Right.
Like that's a huge part of your high school English classes is considering things that the author didn't even realize they put in or the creator didn't realize they put in. And sometimes it's things like that, like bad acting or bad controls.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, it kind of serves it. It works.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's always interesting, yeah. But yeah, I think that's about all I have. Yeah, I would definitely say I preferred the German version. Again, it's not perfect. I think it could have cut some of the special effects that it used in favor of just a couple of the really effective shots.
Okay.
There were some that just like didn't need to happen, and it didn't look good. They were never going to have the budget to make it look good. It just didn't need to be there.
So maybe this is an example of the book being better?
I think so. I mean, I think that what makes that version work is that it's much like the conversation we had about Call of Cthulhu, is that it captures the feel of the story in a unique way to film. It doesn't necessarily try to go one-to-one, but it does hit the beats of the story and like create a unique feel. And so I think that's really, really effective. And then the other one's like a perfectly watchable movie. Like I said, it's much more audience friendly. It's worth a watch.
Yeah.
And, again, welcome back, Richard Stanley.
His long-awaited return. I mean, I would say at the end of the day, one of the big things for me that would make me say the book is better than the movie is the fact that they're talking about a color that is not known to the human eye. And again, beautiful hues of violet. I can name what color that is. So I think there's just that aspect of like, when you're talking about adaptations, you can't the color out of space is a space that's not, or is a color that's not supposed to exist in our world.
Right. I mean, we said that up front. Like,
Yeah.
it's always going to color this conversation.
Oh my
a
God.
certain way.
Okay.
I'm full of them today.
Well, I think that about some of my thoughts. But before we sign off, Alan,
What you got for me?
it's time for the tagline quiz.
When are you going to make a theme for that?
Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. That is a ripoff of something? I can't remember what. Someone tell me, is that Countdown maybe? No. Someone tell me what I just
That
ripped
does
off.
sound very similar to
Yeah,
Countdown.
I ripped something off. But yeah, that would be
All right.
great if we could.
Come on.
All right, the tagline is her game, her rules. And just for some context, not for you, for our listeners. Before we started this episode, I said, this is one I'm giving to you. So that's the only hint I'm going to give you right now.
One more time. Her game, her rules.
Her game, her rules. Do you need any hints?
Why was this a gimme?
I mean, her game, her rules.
You got to give me something.
I'm going to give you the genre
Okay.
because I think that one won't give it away.
This is a film,
immediately.
right?
Yes, this is a film. It's a psychological drama, according to IMDb. That's the first thing it's listed as. It's also listed as a steamy romance, a comedy. The IMDb is kind of a mess with it's like every genre except horror. I think a better categorization would be a sports drama.
Sports drama.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I am lost.
It is.
No. Okay. What?
I'm not telling you the movie.
Okay.
I'm giving you a
give it
hint.
to me.
It is a 2024 film.
Oh, is it Challengers?
It is Challengers.
I have not seen that tagline for that.
Yeah, her game, her rules. There was another one that was pretty
That makes
good,
sense.
but I might save that one for later.
They always make sense retroactively. Well, not always, but usually.
No,
This one does.
some of them absolutely do not make sense
Man,
retroactively.
see, now I'm mad.
Yeah,
That's my favorite movie of the year.
yeah, I know. I told you it was. You should have gotten it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Mike Feist.
Mike Weiss, Josh O'Connor, Zendaya.
Yeah, in Challengers, Tashi, a former tennis prodigy turned coach, transformed her husband into a champion, but to overcome a recent losing streak and redeem himself, he'll need to face off against his former best friend and Tashi's ex-boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you, IMDb, for all of that.
Man, I'm so mad. But if anyone has not seen Challengers, go watch it.
Yeah, that's
Fantastic.
he bought the soundtrack on vinyl. Yeah. Anyway, think that's all for now.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to In Contrast. I'm Nisha.
I'm Alan.
Let us know what you think and your opinions. You can find us at In Contrast Pod on Instagram. We had a few questions for you guys, so definitely hit us up and let us know what you think about this episode. Next up, we'll rate, review, and talk about The Mask of the Red Death
Yes.
by Edgar Allan Poe.
Continuing down our gothic horror theme.
Yeah, we needed to pick, as we said, a few short ones
Yeah.
for these next few. I think we'll do a little bit of a longer one after that one. But what are the movies? Do you remember?
There's quite a few very loose adaptations of this, but I was gonna do the 1919 silent film The Plague in Florence.
Okay.
And then there's the 1964 Vincent Price Mask of the Red Death.
Ooh, Vincent Price.
Yeah.
He has a cookbook.
I did not know that.
Well, now you do.
Sure, we'll speak in detail of that next time.
Yeah, I'll buy it before then. Anyway, we are so excited to see you all next time.
Oh, yes.
Where we'll ask the important question, is the book really better than the movie?
See you next time.